David was never the type to believe in anything beyond what science could explain. At 34 years old, he'd spent most of his adult life staring at stars through telescopes, measuring distances that made his brain hurt, and documenting celestial bodies that had been dead for millions of years. Working at the observatory on top of a Hawaiian mountain wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Most nights he was alone with the equipment and the endless sky above him. That particular evening started like any other. The sun had set hours ago, and the darkness was so complete that the stars looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. David was doing routine maintenance on one of the larger telescopes when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw a woman standing near the observation deck railing. She was tall, maybe 5'10", with pale skin that seemed to catch the starlight in an unusual way. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a thin white shirt with dark pants. Nothing about her outfit was remarkable, but something about her presence made David pause. She wasn't supposed to be there. The observatory was closed to visitors at this hour, and the security system hadn't alerted him to anyone entering the building. "Can I help you?" David called out, trying to sound professional rather than startled. The woman turned to face him, and even from a distance her eyes seemed to reflect light like a cat's eyes might. "I'm just observing," she said. Her voice was smooth but had an odd quality to it, like she was speaking through water. David walked closer, planning to explain that she needed special permission to be there after hours. But as he approached, something caught his attention. Through her thin white shirt, he could see something on her back. At first he thought it was a tattoo, but tattoos don't move. These patterns were shifting, pulsing with a faint blue light that seemed to flow like liquid beneath her skin. He stopped walking and just stared. He couldn't help it. The patterns were beautiful and completely impossible. The woman noticed his gaze and turned slightly, her expression changing from neutral to irritated. "Why do you keep looking at my back, human?" The way she said human made David's stomach drop. It wasn't said with warmth or even casual indifference. It was said the way someone might identify a species of insect. I'm sorry," David stammered. "I just thought I saw something unusual. Are you wearing some kind of special clothing? Some new technology?" The woman studied him for a long moment. Her head tilted slightly like she was calculating something. "You can see them," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "See what?" "The patterns. Most of your kind can't perceive the light frequency. Their eyes aren't capable." She turned fully now, and David got a better look at what he'd glimpsed before. The patterns on her back were intricate, like a map made of glowing lines and dots. They moved slowly, rearranging themselves in configurations that seemed almost mathematical. David's scientific mind tried to find a rational explanation. Bioluminescent bacteria? Some kind of projection technology? But deep down, he knew he was looking at something that shouldn't exist according to everything he understood about the world. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My name is Lyra, and you've just made both of our lives significantly more complicated." Over the next week, David couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. He tried to convince himself that he'd imagined the whole thing. That exhaustion and too many hours alone had made him hallucinate. But then he saw her again. And again, she appeared at the observatory almost every night, always at odd hours, always alone, and always staring at the same section of the sky. David started bringing his camera equipment. If he was going crazy, he wanted documentation. If he wasn't crazy, well, he needed documentation even more. He set up infrared cameras, thermal imaging devices, anything that might capture what his eyes were seeing. One night, about 10 days after their first encounter, David caught her in perfect focus with his infrared camera. The patterns on her back exploded into clarity on his screen. They weren't just random designs. They were star maps, constellations he recognized and some he didn't. And they were moving, rotating, as if tracking the movement of actual celestial bodies in real time. "You're recording me." Lyra's voice came from directly behind him, making him jump so hard he nearly knocked over his equipment. "I had to know if I was losing my mind," David said, trying to keep his voice steady. Lyra looked at the screen, then back at him. For the first time, he saw something like resignation in her expression. "You have tetrachromacy," she said, "a rare genetic variation that allows you to see a wider spectrum of light than most humans. Approximately 1 in 100 of your kind have the genes, but far fewer have fully functional tetrachromatic vision." "How do you know that?" Because otherwise you wouldn't see what you're seeing. My people emit light in frequencies that human eyes typically can't process. We've been careful about that for a very long time. She sat down on the edge of the observation deck, looking suddenly tired. But you're different. You see us as we actually are. David's legs felt weak. He sat down too, keeping some distance between them. You're people. You're saying you're not human? Obviously. Where are you from? Lyra pointed at the sky toward a constellation he didn't immediately recognize. Somewhere your telescopes can't properly see yet. Somewhere far enough away that the light from my home world won't reach Earth for another 1,000 years. David tried to process this. Every scientific principle he'd ever learned was screaming that this was impossible. Interstellar travel at speeds that would make the distance traversable in a reasonable time frame wasn't just difficult. It was theoretically impossible according to current physics. I know what you're thinking, Lyra said. Your current understanding of physics is like a child's understanding of mathematics. Accurate enough for simple problems, but incomplete. We've been traveling between stars for longer than your species has existed. Why are you here? On Earth? We're observers. We've been watching your species develop for a very long time, waiting to see if you'll survive yourselves. The weight of that statement hung in the air between them. David thought about climate change, nuclear weapons, all the ways humanity seemed determined to destroy itself. And what have you concluded? The evaluation is ongoing, but people like me were here to monitor your progress, your technological development specifically. We need to know if you're going to reach the stars or if you're going to burn yourselves out before you get the chance. David looked at the glowing patterns on her back again. And those? What are they? Navigation. My people evolved on a planet with different atmospheric conditions. We developed biological systems that allow us to orient ourselves using stellar positions. These patterns, as you call them, are a living star chart. They update constantly, helping me know exactly where I am in the galaxy at any given moment. That's incredible. That's survival. When your species moves through space using instruments and computers, we carry our navigation in our bodies. It's more reliable, harder to damage or deceive. David had about 1,000 more questions, but Lyra stood up before he could ask them. You need to decide something, she said, her voice serious. Now that you know what I am, I have to report this to my superiors. They'll want to know if you're a threat to our operations. A threat? I'm one person. What could I possibly do? You could talk. You could show people those photographs. You could cause panic or worse, draw attention to us. My people prefer to remain unnoticed. David felt fear creep up his spine. What happens if they decide I'm a threat? Lyra's expression softened slightly. I don't want to find out. Which is why I'm giving you a choice. Forget you ever saw me. Forget everything I've told you and I'll arrange for your memories to be adjusted. You'll remember seeing a regular visitor at the observatory. Nothing more. You'll live your normal life. Or you help me. I have a problem. And your unique vision might actually be useful in solving it. If you help me, I'll make sure you're protected. You'll learn things about the universe that no other human knows. But you'll also be putting yourself in danger. David looked up at the stars, the same stars he'd been studying his entire career. A week ago, they had been distant, cold, and ultimately impersonal. Now they represented something else entirely. They represented other worlds, other beings, other possibilities. What kind of problem? He asked. Lyra smiled slightly. One of my colleagues has gone rogue. He's fallen in love with one of your kind and refuses to return home. If I don't find him and bring him back soon, my superiors will send an intervention team, and that won't be pleasant for anyone involved, especially not for the human he's involved with. David took a deep breath. The smart thing would be to walk away, to let Lyra erase his memories and return to his simple life of telescopes and star charts. But when would he ever get another chance like this? Okay, he said. I'll help you. David's decision to help Lyra changed everything overnight. The next evening, she arrived at the observatory with equipment that looked nothing like anything he'd ever seen. Small metallic devices that seemed to shift shape when he wasn't looking directly at them. A scanner that displayed information in symbols that hurt his eyes to read. Technology that made Earth's most advanced computers look like stone tools. We need to find evidence of where he's been, Lyra explained as she set up the equipment on one of the observation deck tables. My colleague's name is Kale. He was stationed in the Pacific region monitoring marine development and oceanic research. That was 6 months ago. Since then, he's gone completely silent. David watched as she activated one of the devices. It projected a three-dimensional map of the Hawaiian Islands into the air between them. Blue dots scattered across the projection, concentrated mainly around Honolulu and the coastal areas. "What are those dots?" David asked. "Energy signatures. Every time one of my people uses our technology or removes our disguise, we leave traces. These are all the locations where Kale was active before he disappeared." Lyra manipulated the projection with her hands, zooming in on specific areas. "The problem is these readings are all old. Nothing recent. He's either found a way to completely mask his presence or he's stopped using any of our technology entirely." "Is that even possible? For him to just blend in completely?" Lyra nodded slowly. "We're designed to be adaptable. Our physiology can mimic human biology almost perfectly. The patterns on our backs, the light we emit, we can suppress all of it if we choose to. It's exhausting and uncomfortable, but it can be done for extended periods." David studied the map, his mind working through the problem like he would any scientific puzzle. If he was monitoring marine research, he was probably interacting with scientists, researchers, maybe students. Someone who works at the university or one of the research facilities. That's what I thought too. But there are hundreds of people working in those fields across these islands. I can't investigate them all without drawing attention. Lyra looked at him directly. "But you can. You're human. You can ask questions, access records, talk to people without raising suspicion." Over the next few days, David found himself living a double life. During the day, he made calls to various research facilities, claiming he was working on a paper about collaborative research in marine biology. He contacted universities, asked about recent projects, and compiled lists of researchers who had been active in the field over the past year. At night, he met with Lyra at the observatory, sharing what he'd learned while she analyzed the data with her alien technology. It was exhausting, but also thrilling in a way David had never experienced. He was helping an extraterrestrial being search for one of her own kind. The absurdity of it sometimes hit him in quiet moments, making him question his sanity. But then he'd see Lyra's patterns glowing beneath her skin, and he knew this was all too real to be a delusion. On the fourth night of their investigation, David brought something interesting. "I found a marine biologist named Dr. Park. She works at the university's Oceanography Center. About 7 months ago, she published a paper on coral regeneration that had some really unusual findings. According to her colleagues, the research seemed to make an impossible leap forward. They couldn't figure out how she'd achieved results that should have taken years of experimentation." Lyra's eyes lit up with recognition. Kale specialized in biological systems. If he wanted to help someone, that's exactly the kind of work he'd be drawn to. "There's more," David continued. "Dr. Park used to be very social, always attending conferences and department events. But in the last 6 months, she's become almost reclusive. She still does her work, but she's declined every speaking engagement and stopped participating in collaborative projects. Because she's protecting him," Lyra said quietly. "She knows what he is, and she's trying to keep him hidden." David felt a chill run through him. "Do you think she knows about all of you? About your whole operation?" If Kale revealed himself to her completely, yes. He would have had to tell her everything to make her understand what she was getting into. Lyra stood up and began pacing, something David had learned she did when she was processing complex information. "This is worse than I thought. It's not just about Kale refusing to return. He's shared knowledge with a human, possibly transferred technology or information that your species isn't ready for." "What does that mean for them?" Lyra stopped pacing and faced him. "It means the intervention team won't just retrieve Kale. They'll do whatever is necessary to contain the situation, including neutralizing the human who knows too much." The weight of that statement hung heavy in the air. David thought about Dr. Park, a woman he'd never met but who was now in danger simply because she'd gotten involved with the wrong person. Or the wrong being, rather. "We have to warn her," David said. "That's not the mission. My orders are to locate Kale and report his position. What happens after that isn't my concern." "Not your concern? They're going to hurt her, possibly worse." "And for what? Falling in love with someone?" Lyra's expression hardened. "You don't understand what's at stake. My people have protocols for a reason. If humans learn about us before they're ready, it could cause chaos, wars, panic, the collapse of social structures. We've seen it happen on other worlds. So you just let innocent people suffer to maintain your secret? We prevent greater suffering by staying hidden until the right time." But even as Lyra said the words, David could see doubt in her eyes. She touched the back of her neck, a gesture he'd noticed she made when she was uncertain about something. David took a breath, trying to calm himself. Getting angry wouldn't help anyone. Look, I understand you have rules, but you asked for my help because I'm human. Because I can see things from a perspective you can't. Well, from my perspective, warning Dr. Park is the right thing to do. At the very least, she deserves to know what's coming. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. The patterns on her back pulsed slowly, the light dimming and brightening in a rhythm that almost seemed like breathing. Finally, she spoke. If we warn her and she runs, my superiors will know someone tipped them off. The investigation will widen. More of my people will come here, and they won't be as careful as I've been. And if we don't warn her, you'll have to live with knowing you could have saved her but chose not to. Can you do that? Something in Lyra's expression shifted. For the first time since David had met her, she looked genuinely conflicted. You're making this very difficult, she said, but there was almost a hint of humor in her voice. Good. Maybe it should be difficult. Lyra walked to the edge of the observation deck and looked up at the stars. Cale and I trained together. We were part of the same cohort, sent to this planet with the same mission and the same instructions. I always thought he was too curious about humans, too interested in your emotions and your chaos. Our people value logic and order above all else. Emotions are seen as inefficiencies, complications that cloud judgment. But emotions are what make life worth living, David said, joining her at the railing. That's what Cale started to believe. He used to talk about how humans experience things more vividly than we did. Because you knew your time was limited. You only live 100 years at most, sometimes much less. My people can live for thousands of years. We've lost the urgency that makes moments feel precious. David had never thought about life that way. How old are you? 247 of your years. Still young by our standards. Lyra turned to look at him. I'm starting to understand what Cale must have felt. Being here, talking with you, seeing how you humans approach problems with such passion and conviction. It's affecting me in ways I didn't anticipate. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Lyra smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I don't know yet. But I'm starting to think that not knowing is more interesting than being certain all the time. They stood in silence for a while, both looking up at the stars that suddenly felt much less empty than they had before. Okay, Lyra said finally. We'll warn her. But we do it my way, and we do it carefully. If we're going to break protocol, we might as well do it properly. David felt relief wash over him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is probably going to get both of us into more trouble than either of us can imagine. Finding Dr. Park's home address turned out to be easier than David expected. A quick search through university records gave him what he needed. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of Honolulu, away from the busy tourist areas, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where the houses were separated by tropical gardens and tall hedges. Lyra insisted they approach at night when there would be fewer people around to witness anything unusual. They took David's car, a beat-up sedan that had seen better days, and drove down from the mountain observatory as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. How do we even start this conversation? David asked as they navigated the coastal highway. Hi, we know your boyfriend is an alien, and by the way, his people are coming to take him away. We observe first, Lyra said. I need to confirm Cale is actually there before we reveal ourselves. If I'm wrong and he's not with Dr. Park, then we've exposed ourselves for nothing. They parked a block away from the house and walked the rest of the distance. The neighborhood was quiet, most people inside having dinner or watching television. Dr. Park's house was modest, painted a pale yellow with white trim, and a small front yard full of native Hawaiian plants. Lights were on inside, and David could see movement through the windows. Lyra closed her eyes and held up one of her scanning devices. After a moment, her eyes snapped open. He's there. I can detect his biosignature. He's suppressing most of it, but I've known him long enough to recognize the pattern. So what now? Now we knock on the door and hope they don't panic. David felt his heart racing as they approached the front door. This whole situation was surreal. A week ago, his biggest concern had been calibrating telescope lenses. Now he was about to confront an alien fugitive and the human woman protecting him. Lyra knocked 3 times, a firm but not aggressive sound. They waited. David could hear voices inside, then footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack held in place by a security chain. A woman's face appeared in the gap. She was in her late 30s with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and tired eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well.
Can I help you?
Dr. Park, Lyra said calmly. My name is Lyra. I need to speak with you and Cale. It's urgent. The woman's face went pale. For a moment, David thought she might slam the door shut. Instead, she said, I don't know anyone named Cale. Yes, you do, Lyra responded. And I know what he is because I'm the same. Please, we're not here to cause trouble. We're here to help. But we don't have much time. Dr. Park's eyes moved to David, clearly trying to assess whether this was some kind of trap. Who are you? She asked him. My name is David. I work at the Mauna Kea Observatory. I know this sounds crazy, but everything Lyra is telling you is true. Please, just give us 5 minutes to explain. There was a long pause. Then a male voice came from inside the house. Let them in, Rachel. Dr. Park hesitated, then closed the door to remove the chain before opening it fully. Come in. But if this is some kind of setup, I have emergency contacts who know exactly where I am. Understood, Lyra said as they stepped inside. The interior of the house was cluttered but comfortable. Books and scientific journals covered most surfaces, and through a doorway, David could see a small home laboratory set up in what should have been a dining room. A man stood in the living room, and David knew immediately that this was Cale. He looked completely human at first glance. Average height, athletic build, with features that could have been Korean or perhaps mixed heritage. But when David looked closely, using the special vision that had gotten him into this situation in the first place, he could see the faint traces of light beneath the man's skin. Cale was suppressing his patterns, but not perfectly. Lyra, Cale said, his voice a mixture of resignation and something else. Relief, maybe. I was wondering when they'd send someone. You've been off the grid for 6 months, Cale. What did you think would happen? I thought I'd have more time. Cale moved to stand next to Rachel, taking her hand in a gesture that was unmistakably protective. How much does he know? He nodded toward David. Everything, Lyra said. He can see us. Tetrachromatic vision. Cale's eyebrows rose. That's rare. And problematic. We have bigger problems, Lyra said. I was ordered to locate you and report your position. Once I do, an intervention team will be deployed. You know what that means. Rachel's grip on Cale's hand tightened. They're going to take him away. It's worse than that, David said gently. Lyra told me they'll do whatever is necessary to contain the situation. That includes dealing with humans who know too much. Rachel's face went even paler. They're going to eliminate me. Not if we can help it, Lyra said quickly. That's why we're here. I haven't reported your location yet. I came directly here instead. Cale looked at Lyra with surprise. You broke protocol. Coming here without reporting first, that's a serious violation. I'm aware. David convinced me that warning you was the right thing to do, even if it contradicts my orders. David seems to have quite an influence on you, Cale observed, a slight smile crossing his face. I know that feeling. Lyra's patterns flickered beneath her skin, a response she seemed unable to control. We're not here to discuss my personal development. We're here to find a solution. You can't stay here, Cale. Once the intervention team arrives, they'll find you eventually. Their resources are far greater than mine. I'm not leaving Rachel, Kyle said firmly. I love her. I know our people don't understand that concept the way humans do, but I've experienced it now and I can't just walk away from it. Rachel spoke up, her voice shaking slightly but determined. And I'm not letting them take him. We've been careful. We've kept everything hidden. Maybe if we just continue what we've been doing. It won't work, Lyra said, shaking her head. I found you in 4 days. The intervention team will have more advanced tracking equipment and more personnel. You might hide for a few more weeks, maybe a month, but they will find you. David had been listening to the conversation, his mind working through possibilities. What if they couldn't track him? Is there a way to completely mask his presence? Not without specialized equipment, Lyra said. Equipment I don't have access to. But your people have it, right? Somewhere? On our ship, yes. But I can't just walk onto the ship and steal containment shields. There are protocols, security measures. Cale suddenly looked thoughtful. What about the old shelter on the Big Island? The one we used during the initial survey 20 years ago? Lyra's eyes widened slightly. That facility was supposed to be dismantled. Was supposed to be. But you know how bureaucratic our people are. I checked about a year ago, just out of curiosity. The facility is still there, buried under a lava field. Most of the equipment was removed, but not all of it. Some of the older containment technology might still be functional. Even if it is, containment shields only hide you from detection. They don't solve the underlying problem. You'd be trapped inside a shield, unable to leave, unable to live any kind of normal life. Rachel squeezed Cale's hand. It's better than the alternative. David could see the pain in both their faces. These were two people who'd found something precious and were watching it slip away despite their best efforts. It reminded him of his own past, of relationships that had ended not because of lack of love but because circumstances made them impossible. There has to be another option, David said. Some way to satisfy your superiors without destroying what Cale and Rachel have built together. Lyra looked at him like he was being naive. My people don't compromise on security matters. The rules exist to protect both our species from premature contact. But contact has already happened, David argued. Rachel knows, I know. The secret is already compromised. Taking Cale away and hurting Rachel doesn't undo that. It just creates more problems. The intervention team won't see it that way. Cale spoke up again, his voice quiet but intense. What if we could prove that the contact was beneficial? That sharing some of our knowledge with humans actually helped them? What do you mean? Lyra asked. Rachel went to a laptop on the coffee table and opened it. Show them, she said to Cale. Kyle pulled up a series of files, research documents filled with data and images that David couldn't fully understand, but recognized as significant. Rachel was working on coral reef restoration. The reefs around these islands are dying because of climate change and ocean acidification. Traditional methods weren't working fast enough. So I helped her. I shared some insights about biological adaptation systems my people developed. Nothing that would give away our existence or lead to weapons development. Just information about how to help damaged ecosystems recover more quickly. Rachel's voice grew more confident as she spoke. The results have been incredible. We've achieved regeneration rates that were thought impossible. If this research goes public, it could help save reef systems around the world. That's exactly the kind of interference we're supposed to prevent, Lyra said, but her tone was uncertain. Why? David asked. If helping prevents catastrophic environmental collapse, isn't that better than standing by and watching humans destroy their own planet? Our protocols exist because we can't predict all the consequences of intervention. What seems helpful now might cause problems later. Cale closed the laptop. I've thought about this constantly over the past 6 months. Yes, there are risks. But the drive to the Big Island took most of the night. They took 2 cars, David and Lyra in one, Cale and Rachel following behind in Rachel's vehicle. Lyra had insisted on this arrangement, saying that if something went wrong, at least one pair might escape. David kept glancing at Lyra as he drove, noting how she stared out the window at the dark ocean passing by. You're thinking about what happens after this, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking about what I've already done, breaking protocol, failing to report, actively helping someone evade retrieval. Each of those violations carries severe consequences. Can they really punish you that badly? You're just trying to do the right thing. Lyra actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. My people don't think in terms of right thing the way you do. There are protocols and there are violations. Everything else is irrelevant. That's a terrible way to live. It's kept our civilization stable for thousands of years. Your people value individual choice and emotional fulfillment. Our people value collective security and logical consistency. Neither approach is perfect. They fell into silence for a while. Then David asked the question that had been bothering him. What made you decide to help us? You could have just reported Kyle's location and moved on. Why didn't you? Lyra touched the back of her neck, that unconscious gesture David had learned to recognize. I don't know. Maybe it was the way you argued with me, refusing to accept that there was only one way to handle this situation. Maybe it was seeing Cale and Rachel together, seeing what he'd found here. Or maybe I'm just tired of following orders without questioning them. Welcome to being human, David said with a slight smile. We question everything, usually to our own detriment. I'm beginning to understand why Cale found that appealing. They reached the dock just before dawn. From there, they took a charter boat to the Big Island, with Lyra using some kind of technology to make the boat captain forget he'd ever seen them as soon as they disembarked. The lava fields where the old facility was buried were remote, far from any hiking trails or tourist destinations. The landscape was otherworldly. Black volcanic rock stretched in every direction, hardened flows frozen in twisted shapes that looked almost sculptural. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too vibrant to be real. How do we even find this place? Rachel asked, looking around at the vast expanse of lava rock. Everything looks the same. Cale pulled out a device similar to the ones Lyra carried. The facility is about 2 miles inland, buried under the 1987 flow. The entrance is camouflaged, but it should still be functional. They walked in silence, navigating the uneven terrain carefully. David's legs were burning by the time Cale finally stopped at a spot that looked identical to everywhere else they'd been. Here, Cale said, running his device over a patch of rock. The entrance is right below this. Lyra joined him, adding her scanner to his. After a moment, a section of the lava rock shimmered and disappeared, revealing a metal hatch set into the ground. It was covered in dust and debris, clearly untouched for years. Cale knelt down and placed his hand on a panel next to the hatch. The panel glowed briefly, then the hatch unsealed with a hiss of equalizing pressure. A ladder led down into darkness. "I'll go first," Cale said, activating a light on his device. "The air quality should be fine. These facilities are designed to maintain themselves for decades." They climbed down one by one into a tunnel that opened into a larger chamber. As Lyra and Cale activated more lights, David could see that the facility was surprisingly spacious. Multiple rooms branched off from the main chamber, filled with equipment that looked both impossibly advanced and oddly dated at the same time. This was built during the initial survey of Earth, Cale explained as they explored. "My people wanted secure locations where they could operate without being detected. Most of these facilities were dismantled when we moved to the current observation protocols, but a few were abandoned instead." Rachel was examining some of the equipment in what looked like a laboratory. "This technology, it's incredible. Even not knowing what most of it does, I can tell it's decades beyond anything we have. Centuries, actually," Lyra corrected. "Most of this equipment is outdated by our current standards, but it would still seem like magic to your scientists." David wandered into another room and found something that made him stop. It was a viewing screen showing a star map, but unlike any star map he'd ever seen. It showed not just the positions of stars but their movements over time, trajectories traced in light. And at the center of it all was Earth, marked with symbols he couldn't read but understood meant something significant. "That's the evaluation chart," Lyra said from behind him. "Every species my people monitor has one. Those markers show key developmental points, moments where the species made choices that affected their survival probability. What are we at now, in terms of survival probability? About 50-50. Your species is at a critical juncture. The next few decades will determine whether you make it to interstellar capability or collapse under your own environmental and social pressures." "No pressure, then," David said with dark humor. Cale called out from another room. "Found it!" "The containment equipment is still here, and it looks functional." They gathered in what Kyle had identified as the containment chamber. Several devices lined the walls, covered in dust but intact. Cale and Lyra worked together to activate them, their hands moving over controls with practiced ease. "This shield technology will mask our biosignatures," Cale explained to Rachel and David. "Once it's active, the intervention team won't be able to detect us using their standard equipment. They'd have to physically search every square foot of the island to find us." "How long can we stay hidden?" Rachel asked. "As long as the power holds out. These facilities draw energy from geothermal sources. We could potentially stay hidden for years." "But we can't leave," Rachel said quietly. "This would be a prison, just a comfortable one." Cale pulled her close. "A prison where we're together is better than freedom apart." Lyra was checking readings on one of her devices, her expression troubled. "We have a problem. I'm detecting incoming vessels. The intervention team is already here." "That's impossible," Cale said. "You haven't missed your reporting deadline yet." "They must have sent the team preemptively. They've been monitoring my communications, realized I was delaying. They knew something was wrong." Lyra looked at the others with genuine fear in her eyes. "They'll be at this location within hours. The facility is in their database. It's one of the first places they'll check. Then we activate the shields now and hope they can't penetrate them," Cale said, moving to the control panel. "Wait," David said. "If you hide in here, you're just delaying the inevitable. Eventually, they'll find a way to breach the shields or you'll run out of resources. There has to be another way. There isn't time to debate alternatives, Lyra said sharply. The team will be here soon and they won't hesitate to use force if they encounter resistance. David's mind raced. There had to be something they could do. Some option they weren't seeing. Then an idea struck him. Crazy and probably impossible, but it was something. What if we could talk to them? Not fight, not hide, but actually communicate. Explain the situation and try to negotiate. Negotiate with an intervention team. They're not authorized to negotiate. They follow orders, period. But those orders come from somewhere, right? From your superiors who make the protocols. What if we could make a case to them directly? Kale looked skeptical. The chain of command doesn't work that way. Even if we wanted to appeal to the decision makers, we'd need to go through official channels, submit formal requests, wait for reviews. The intervention team would retrieve us long before any of that happened. What if I contacted them? Lyra said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. I'm still technically an active observer in good standing. If I filed an emergency report directly to the Oversight Council, bypassing normal channels, they'd be required to review it before authorizing force. That's a massive violation of protocol, Kyle said. You'd be ending your career at minimum. My career's already over. The moment I decided to come here without reporting your location, I crossed a line I can't uncross. Lyra looked at David, and he saw something in her expression he hadn't seen before. Determination mixed with fear, but also a strange kind of peace. You asked me earlier what made me decide to help you. I think it's because you showed me that following rules blindly isn't the same as doing what's right. Maybe it's time my people learned that lesson too. Rachel spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. What would you tell them? What could possibly convince them to change centuries of protocol? The truth. That contact between our species has already happened, and it resulted in something beneficial. That punishing that contact won't undo it, but might prevent future positive outcomes. That maybe our evaluation of humanity has been too passive, too detached. Lyra looked around at the ancient facility. We've been watching your species for so long, treating you like specimens in an experiment. But KL showed us something different is possible. Real connection, mutual benefit. Maybe that's worth more than maintaining perfect security. David felt hope rising in his chest, but also doubt. Do you really think they'll listen? They didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after Lyra's transmission, the sky above the lava fields began to shimmer. David looked up and saw what he first thought was a heat mirage, but it was too controlled, too deliberate. The air itself seemed to fold, and then a craft appeared where nothing had been moments before. It wasn't at all what David had expected. No bright lights, no dramatic landing sequence. The ship was organic-looking, its surface appearing more grown than built, with curves and patterns that reminded him of the light on Lyra's back. It settled onto the ground with barely a sound, and a section of its side opened like a flower blooming. 3 figures emerged, and David's breath caught in his throat. Unlike Lyra and Kale, who suppressed their true appearance, these beings made no attempt to hide what they were. Their skin glowed with constantly shifting patterns, entire galaxies seeming to swirl across their bodies. They were taller than humans, more elongated in proportion, and they moved with an unnaturally smooth grace. The one in the center is Council Member Theron, Lyra whispered to David. She's one of the oldest of our kind, over 4,000 years old. The others are her security detail. Rachel grabbed Kyle's arm. They're beautiful, she said, awe evident in her voice. They're dangerous, Kyle corrected quietly. Don't let their appearance fool you. They have the authority to end this any way they see fit. The beings approached, stopping about 10 feet away. Theron's eyes, which seemed to contain actual starlight, fixed on each of them in turn before she spoke. When she did, David was surprised to hear perfect English. Observer Lyra, observer Kyle, and the humans who have complicated everything. Her voice was strange, multiple tones layered over each other, but the words were clear. This is an unusual situation. Lyra stepped forward, her posture respectful but not submissive. Council Member Theron, thank you for agreeing to meet with us directly. I did not agree. I am required by protocol to investigate when an emergency override is activated. Do not mistake obligation for interest. Theron's patterns shifted, colors darkening. You have violated numerous protocols, Lyra. You failed to report Observer Kale's location when discovered. You made contact with civilians and shared information about our presence. You activated emergency channels for what amounts to a personal dispute. Each of these violations carries severe consequences. I understand the severity, Lyra said. I'm prepared to accept the consequences. But I'm asking that you hear what we've learned before making your final decision. I already know what you believe you've learned, that emotions are valuable, that connection between species can be beneficial, that our protocols are too rigid. Theron's gaze moved to Kale and Rachel. Observer Kale has been broadcasting these ideas through every suppressed communication we've intercepted. His attachment to the human female is documented. None of this is new information. Rachel surprised everyone by stepping forward. David moved to stop her, but Kale held him back. With respect, Rachel said, her voice shaking but determined. You don't know everything. You know the facts, but you don't understand what they mean. Theron's pattern swirled faster, a sign of what David suspected was surprise or possibly amusement. A human presumes to lecture me about understanding. This should be entertaining. 6 months ago I was ready to give up, Rachel continued. I'd spent years trying to save coral reefs that were dying faster than I could document their collapse. Every day I watched ecosystems that took thousands of years to build disappear because of damage we caused in decades. I felt helpless, like everything I did was pointless. Your emotional state is irrelevant to our protocols. It's not irrelevant to what happened next. Kale found me on a beach, collecting samples from a reef that was mostly dead. He asked what I was doing, and I told him I was trying to save something that was probably already lost. And he said something that changed everything. He said that just because something seemed impossible didn't mean it wasn't worth trying. Rachel's eyes were bright with tears now, but she didn't stop talking. He helped me. He shared ideas that led to breakthroughs I never could have achieved on my own. But more than that, he gave me hope again. He reminded me why I became a scientist in the first place. Not just to document decline, but to find solutions. Theron was silent for a moment. Then she said, You mistake assistance for affection. Kale provided information. That is not the same as the emotional bond you claim. You're wrong, Kale said, stepping up beside Rachel. What we have is both. Yes, I helped her research, but I also learned from her. She showed me what it means to care about something even when success isn't guaranteed. To keep trying because the effort itself matters regardless of the outcome. Your people, our people, we've lost that. We calculate probabilities and make logical decisions, but we've forgotten what it feels like to care. Emotions cloud judgment, Theron stated. They lead to irrational choices and inefficient outcomes. Do they? David spoke up, unable to stay quiet any longer. Because from where I'm standing, emotions led to coral regeneration techniques that could save ocean ecosystems across the planet. Emotions led Lyra to question whether your protocols were actually serving their intended purpose. Emotions got all of us here, trying to find a better solution instead of just following orders blindly. Theron turned her full attention to David, and he felt the weight of those ancient eyes examining him. You are the one with tetrachromatic vision, the human who can see us clearly. I can see the light patterns, yes, can you see this? Theron's pattern suddenly shifted, becoming more complex, more intense. For a moment, David saw something incredible. Patterns that told stories, mathematics that expressed emotions, an entire language written in light across her skin. I see it, David said quietly, but I don't understand it. What you see is my memory of the last world we evaluated before Earth. They were brilliant, creative, passionate. Much like humans, actually. They developed space travel, began reaching out to nearby systems. We observed, we waited, we followed protocols. Theron's patterns darkened, and then they destroyed themselves in a war that ignited their atmosphere. 3 billion individuals gone in a matter of days. We watched it happen and did nothing because our protocols forbid interference. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Lyra spoke. You think intervention might have saved them? I don't think. I calculate probabilities. There is an 87% chance that sharing certain technologies would have prevented the conflict that destroyed them. But we followed protocols and they died. Theron's patterns brightened again. Do you understand why those protocols exist now? We cannot save every species. We cannot predict all outcomes. If we interfere too early, we might cause the very disasters we hope to prevent. If we interfere too late, we've accomplished nothing. So we observe, we wait, and we accept that some species will not survive. It is logical, it is necessary, and it is the burden we carry. David felt something shift in his understanding. Theron wasn't a heartless enforcer of arbitrary rules. She was someone who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, who had made impossible choices and lived with the consequences. "But you're here," David said. "You didn't have to come. You could have just sent the intervention team to retrieve Kale and Lyra. Instead, you activated that emergency protocol yourself." Why? Theron's patterns pulsed slowly. "Because when Lyra filed her report, she said something that troubled me. She said that our observation of humanity has been incomplete, because we've only measured your technological progress. We haven't measured your capacity for hope, for adaptation, for choosing connection over isolation." And I realized she might be right. She walked closer to where Kale and Rachel stood together. "You two represent something we eliminated from our own species thousands of years ago. The willingness to sacrifice logical advantage for emotional fulfillment. We saw it as weakness, as inefficiency, but watching humanity, I wonder if we were wrong. You humans are terribly inefficient. You make decisions based on feelings rather than facts. You prioritize individuals over collective benefit. By every logical measure, you should have destroyed yourselves already." "But we haven't," Rachel said. "No, you haven't. And the question I've been trying to answer for the past century of observing your species is why. What is it about human irrationality that keeps you surviving against all odds?" Theron looked at Kale. "I think you found the answer. It's not despite your emotions that you survive. It's because of them. Emotions drive you to care about each other, to protect things beyond your individual interests, to keep trying even when logic says you should give up." David felt hope blooming in his chest. "So you'll let them stay together? Let Kale remain on Earth?" "It's not that simple. Kale has shared technology and information that violates strict protocols. He has formed an attachment that compromises his objectivity. By our laws, he should be retrieved and face consequences for his actions." "But," Lyra prompted, "but laws that don't account for new understanding are just traditions pretending to be wisdom." Theron's patterns brightened, taking on colors David had never seen before. "I am authorized to make exceptions to protocol when circumstances warrant." "This situation warrants exception. What does that mean exactly?" Kyle asked carefully.